So here are the types of assessments we're going to look through, and I'm just going to go through these kind of one at a time and talk in detail about where they fall as far as a formative versus a summative and what would be the purpose of this particular assessment type and where it fits in the grand scheme of things. So let's start with extra credit. Okay, this is kind of one of my pet peeves. So let's say that you've got an extra credit question on a test or on a quiz or whatever. So here's my question for you. Does that activity, that extra credit activity, whether it's extra questions on a test or whether it's an extra, a Sudoku puzzle or something like that that you give the kid for extra credit, okay, does that activity address a standard? If it does, then it's either formative or summative. That's regular credit if it's summative, okay? That should go into their grade if it's summative. If it's formative, then you're going to use it to help you change your instruction, or a student's going to use it to help change their thinking to improve their learning. But either way, it is not extra credit, okay? It is about the standards, and so that's regular credit, depending on whether we make it formative or summative. But it's not extra, okay? Is it not about the standards? Okay, so I don't know if you have teachers like this in your building, but in mine, we will often give extra credit points for students who bring in boxes of Kleenexes at the beginning of the year. Or we'll give students extra credit if they wear a red shirt on the field trip day. Okay, so now let's think about that. If our purpose in assessment is to determine whether or not a student understands content standards, grade level content standards, have they mastered that? If that's our purpose, then does bringing in a box of Kleenexes mean that you suddenly understand mathematics better? If you wear a red shirt on the field trip day, does that mean you understand mathematics better? No, absolutely not. Okay, these things have nothing to do with the standards, and therefore they should have nothing to do with their grade. All this is blatant grade inflation for no reason at all that has to do with what the grade should actually stand for. Okay, extra credit of that nature should never exist. There should not be anything that just artificially inflates grades, okay, just because it makes people feel good. All right, we need to get over this idea that everybody's a pop star, everybody's amazing. Instead, we need to be able to honestly assess where students are at. And if they are below where we think they should be, then we need to be willing to help them. And we need to say, it's okay. You still have value. You are still worth it as a student and as a person, as a human being. You are still worth it. And I'm still going to help you, okay, and find value in you. And we don't need something as cheap as extra credit to pump that up. Now, can you tell I don't like extra credit? So let me ask this then. Well, what if the activity doesn't exactly address the standard? What if it either goes deeper into the standards or kind of it's a remedial version of those standards? So it's not exactly the standards, but still math related. Okay, well, let's think about this. If it goes deeper, this is enrichment. Okay, that's called enrichment. That's what good teachers would do if our formative assessments tell us that we need some enrichment. But that still doesn't tell me how well a student has mastered grade level content. Okay, so if I have a student working at above grade level, then that does not indicate how well they have gotten at the grade level content. Okay, so again, if our goal in grading is to present how well a student, to what degree a student has mastered grade level content standards, then enrichment is not a piece of that. Enrichment is an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to go deeper, an opportunity to explore maybe those standards in a better format. But it is not an opportunity to artificially inflate my grade. I still want my grade to represent what I actually know about those standards. Okay. Now, if we're doing enrichment the way that Common Core asks us to do enrichment, which is actually within the grade level standards, then we are going deeper, and this may be an indicator that a student is exceeding the standard. Okay, that could be, but oftentimes in our current culture, the enrichment is just go to the next grade level stuff, which should not happen anyway according to Common Core, but that's in another talk. All right, if it's below the grade level standards, that's remediation. This is your RTI process. This is filling in gaps. That's not extra credit. Okay, that is a making sure that students have the skills that they need to be successful at the level we're asking them to be successful at. Again, that's not extra credit. So neither of these two actually qualify for extra credit and should not be placed as a summative grade. In other words, it should not affect a student's final grade. I did have a teacher recently who told me that their version of extra credit was they would put some questions, additional questions on the test that had to do with some skills that the majority of students had missed previously, so they had additional questions of that type. And if they got those additional questions correct, then they would go back and replace a previous summative assessment that said that they had not mastered it. So in other words, if they're showing mastery now, which they didn't have earlier, then they were replacing that previous summative assessment with this new information. I would not consider that extra credit. I would consider that reassessing the student. I think that's a good practice to be able to reassess, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, what about participation grades? And by definition, a participation grade is a grade based solely on the frequency of participation or quality of participation in class. And so, what does this grade measure? So we're looking again at the validity of this. We just saw extra credit has no validity, okay, in most cases. So what about participation grades? Well, it measures not content mastery. Okay, it's not telling us how well a student understands math, it's telling us how well a student participates. Now that's an important skill, it's an important life skill to be able to participate in a group discussion, to participate in one-on-one discussion. That's really, really super important, but it does not demonstrate how well students understand mathematics. You can have the quietest kid on the earth and they understand everything about mathematics. You can have the most talkative student on the planet and they don't get anything, okay, about the mathematics. So this does not give us a valid measure of content mastery. What it does give us is a willingness to participate. Do they actually have a willingness to jump into their own learning process? Super important. Okay, but if you're giving participation grades, those should be formative. In other words, you should be documenting those, you should be counting those, but probably as a 0% of your grade, so that you've got the data so that you can use that data to inform parents, inform students, set some goals as far as participating more and getting involved in their own learning process, but it does not demonstrate content mastery. So it's not going to be a summative grade that's going to count towards the student's final grade. Okay, so what can we do? Just keep track of your participation, tally it on a seating chart or whatever, and if you want to put it in your grade book, count it as 0%. It's got to be a category that's worth nothing towards their final grade. The particular grade system that we have at my school district, I can put categories as 0% and it will still give me like averages, class averages, individual student averages in each category, even though it's worth 0%. So that's very handy. I personally don't use participation grades, but I know some teachers who do. It's up to you. If you feel like it's going to benefit the student, fine. Go for it, but please not as a summative. It is not a summative assessment because it's not valid. And it's also not reliable. We couldn't reproduce it. All right, so here's the big one. Here's the biggie that everybody talks about, homework. All right, there are two types of homework grades that we give. One is homework completion and one is homework accuracy. Oftentimes teachers will confuse the two and they will give a completion grade as if it were an accuracy grade. So I have known teachers who will sit at the front of the room and say, do you have your homework done? Please hold up your sheet of paper. They hold up the sheet of paper and then the teacher gives them 5 points in the grade book if they hold up a sheet of paper. And I've talked to students who have held up the same sheet of paper for 3 weeks. It had a poem that they wrote on it and it had nothing to do with mathematics. So I would, just to be clear, completion is it done? Is it done? Not is it accurate, but is it done? Okay, so what does this measure? Does it measure content mastery? Absolutely not. Okay, this does not measure content mastery. It measures whether or not a student has put forth effort to get this done. There is no possible way that this is summative. This cannot be an indicator. It absolutely never is an indicator of how well students understand mathematics. Okay, at most it can point us in a direction, maybe, but we know very often that there are students who don't do their homework but still understand it, and we know that there are students who do lots of their homework and still don't understand it, the mathematics. Okay, so this is not an indicator. I had a teacher who told me, "Well, that's just one man's opinion." I said, "And no, it's not. This is fact. It does not measure content mastery." Now, I'm not saying it's not important. It is important. Now, there can be an argument as to whether or not it's important. I think this is important. Homework completion is important. But there is no argument. There can be no argument about the definition of a homework completion grade not showing content mastery. So what does it show? It really shows effort. Okay, and this is a formative assessment. For me, I keep it in my gradebook. I check homework completion every single day, and I put it in my gradebook for parents to see because parents can access it online, log in and see their students' grades. But I count all of those homework completion grades as 0%. But in this way, I can look at a student and say, okay, this student has only 60% of their homework done. Okay, and maybe this is, if we could increase that to 80 or 90%, then probably you're going to be increasing your summative grades. Okay, on summative assessments, you're going to be doing better on that. So this is a formative assessment. Now, a lot of teachers have said, well, if you don't count completion as getting done, students won't do it. And I'm here to tell you that is an absolute lie. That is us saying things that we are used to from our own tradition, from what we are comfortable with, not based in truth. Okay? The truth of the matter is, I have 0% homework completion categories for my grades, and my students do over 90% of their homework. My homework completion rates are higher than they have ever been from when I was counting homework as a grade. We also know from research, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but we also know from research that homework completion actually is, well, the homework completion, just getting it done, whether it's right or wrong, does help us towards homework, or towards achievement, towards content area achievement, but it is not a measure in and of itself of content mastery. Now, a lot of people have said we got to get rid of homework completely. Okay, and if you look at all the research that's out there, here's kind of what we know. Even the supporters of homework, the people who say, yes, we have to have homework, we have to have it all the time, such as NCTM's had put out a homework brief on this, where Harris Cooper had done a meta-analysis of over 150 studies on homework. And Harris Cooper is kind of the go-to guy. He's the pro homework. He loves homework. One of the things that he admits is that homework has little to no effect on elementary students. Okay, so basically students K through 5, somewhere in that range, homework has absolutely zero effect. Okay, whether you give homework or you don't give homework, it does not change their achievement. It does not increase their understanding. It doesn't help at all. Okay, now that's not to say we shouldn't give it, because they can be learning some time management skills and some of those other things if we're explicitly teaching them, but it actually doesn't help them. Okay, it begins to help at the middle school level, kind of 6th, 7th, and 8th, and helps even more in high school and college is when homework really comes in. There's also a positive correlation between homework frequency and student achievement. So just by having homework every single night, students do better. There's a positive correlation between homework completion and student achievement. So just getting it done, not getting it right, just getting it done, increases student achievement. And there's a positive correlation between homework that promotes self-regulation and student achievement. So in other words, in my class, students have to check, correct, and reflect on their homework. So they're supposed to check their homework. All the answers are online, so they check all of their answers. If they got it right, they put a star. If they get it wrong, they try and fix it. And if they can't figure out how to fix it, they put a question mark and ask me about it the next day. Then they're supposed to write a reflection statement. We're still working on that part of it, but the reflection statement is, one thing that you did well, one thing you need to improve on, so that they can, again, kind of set those goals for themselves to improve their learning. So if we're promoting those self-regulation habits, then student achievement goes up. There's a negative correlation between the relative amount of time spent on math homework versus other subjects. Now, I find this interesting. It's important that kids have homework very frequently in mathematics, but if they have a lot of homework, they do worse. So we need homework every night, but in small little bits, okay? Just kind of bite-sized chunks is what I tell the students. In fact, I tell them that if they spend more than 15 or 20 minutes on homework at home, they need to stop, because they've obviously got a problem and they need to come see me anyway. So 15, 20 minutes, shut it down, stop working on it, don't beat your head against a wall. There's also a negative correlation between drill and practice homework and student achievement. So the more homework that they have where they just have to drill over and over and over and over again with the same types of problems, the worse that they do. Now, the bad part about this is that's almost every single homework assignment in every single book that we have. Even the textbook that I wrote myself for Common Core for my classroom has too much drill and practice homework in it because that's just what I'm used to. And I got to go back and clean that up and get that out of there because there's a negative correlation between that drill and practice. Now, not get rid of it completely, but if we have too much drill and practice and not enough where they're actually thinking and reflecting, then we're not getting that student achievement. So homework is important, but we need to rethink how we use it. So I do think we have to have homework. All right, so next we're going to talk about homework accuracy versus homework completion.